want to take you back in time a little bit. September 18th, 2008, I think it was 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning. Oval Office, President of the United States, Head of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, Secretary of Treasury, Hank Paulson. Lehman Brothers had been kicked into bankruptcy in London on Monday, in New York later in the day on Monday. In 48 hours, they realized that Lehman Brothers was central to the working capital market, the commercial paper market. The financial system started to collapse. Bernanke and Paulson are not alarmist. They told the president, if we don't have $1 trillion cash infusion into the U.S. financial system by 5 o'clock this afternoon, the American financial system will collapse in 48 hours. The world's financial system will collapse 72 hours after that. And we will have global anarchy and chaos in a week. I want you to embrace that for a second. Because the fuse that got lit there and with that match is what brought Donald Trump to the presidency. President Bush said, it's not my responsibility. You gotta go up to Capitol Hill. We've checked. I don't have the authorization to do that. They went up and saw Pelosi and Harry Reid, McConnell in a meeting. Balance sheet of the Federal Reserve at 10 o'clock in the morning on September 18th of 2008 was $880 billion. Balance sheet of the Federal Reserve at noon on the 20th of January 2017, when Donald Trump took the oath of office, was $4.5 trillion. We essentially just printed money. There's all kind of fancy terms for quantitative easing, all this. In a panic, and that's what it was, you remember, I don't have to tell, particularly entrepreneurs, it's the greatest financial crisis, far greater than the Great Depression. It's the greatest financial crisis we ever had. And the permanent political class and the elites made a conscious decision to bail themselves out. Happened Bank of Tokyo, European Central Bank, Bank of England, Federal Reserve, all the same thing. The party of Davos. Flood the zone with liquidity. We'll lift up real estate prices, stocks, the hedge funds, if you own assets. Had to save the system. No one had ever conceived of deflation, right? Deflation like this, potential deflation. If you go to those that took economics in college, you go back to your textbooks of Samuelson and all these great economists, they're all irrelevant. Never had a time of negative interest rates for this prolonged period. Richard Fisher, the reason we know this, it's all in congressional testimony. It was kind of buried later, but it's all in congressional testimony what went on. Richard Fisher from Dallas, governor of the Federal Reserve down there, Federal Reserve Bank, argued in the meetings that kept on with the most progressive president in history, President Obama, continued to flood the zone. He said, this is not free. This is not free. There's a big cost to this. And the cost is to the working class and to the middle class. Because remember, the reverse of the negative interest rates is you get zero in a savings account. 5,000 years of the Judeo-Christian West, we've taught one thing. To be a good householder is to put money away, to save for the future. Now you get zero. You're a sucker. We have a $9.5 trillion gap in our pension liabilities versus obligations because of the negative interest rates, principally. $9.5 trillion. School districts, even if they weren't over-leveraged, can't issue a bond offering to fix a roof because there's no juice in the bond offering. It was the working class and the middle class that paid the price for this. Yeah, we saved the system. We didn't get to the core problems. We kicked the can down the road. We're kicking the can down the road today. That's what Donald Trump tapped into. People say, hey, Bannon, you guys, you populists, you economic nationalists, the deplorables, why are they so angry? Why are they so angry all the time? They're rational human beings. They understand what's going on. We just had the hurricane situation down in Texas. What, a year or so ago? The Federal Reserve or the Treasury did this analysis. Half of the households in the country can't put their hands on $400 in cash to buy a generator, right? You take the equity in a home, which is, I think, fairly ephemeral. Take the equity in a home away from an average American. I think they've got $10,000 in a bank account. Donald Trump was able to tap into that. When I stepped into the campaign August 13th, I think there was 88 days to go. He's down, I don't know, pick the poll, 10, 12, 14, 16 points. Double digits down in most battleground states. And I said that night when I took the job, I said, don't worry about any of that. Those numbers don't matter. Only two numbers that count. Right track, wrong track. 2/3 of the people still think the country's on the wrong track. They admire President Obama. They admire President Obama and his wife. They still think the country's on the wrong track, and he was not the agent of change. But I said the more important number is all this analysis that Pat Caddell's doing. Pat Caddell, who just passed away a few days ago, an absolute giant in American politics. A Democrat that had been with the last populist president, Jimmy Carter, but he understood this kind of populist movement. He said his analysis showed for the first time in American history, working class and middle class people at 70%, it had broken the 70% number, believed America was in decline, and the elites were comfortable with that. And I said, to 100% metaphysical certitude, you will win. If we just stick to the basic themes of your campaign, we're just going to compare and contrast every day that she is the representative of a corrupt and incompetent elite, and that you are essentially the tribune of the people in three things. You're going to stop mass illegal immigration and limit legal immigration to re-implement the rule of law to get our sovereignty back, but most importantly, to protect our workers. Unskilled workers at the low level, African American and Hispanic primarily, and skilled workers in the tech industry with the HB1 visas and the legal immigration, to limit it until we get wages up. Number two, we're going to bring back manufacturing jobs from China. And number three, we're going to get out of these pointless foreign wars that have cost us $7 trillion with what, 10, 12,000 dead, 40,000, 50,000 wounded? $7 trillion. And every day in the campaign, if you go back and look, he hammered this, he hammered this, he hammered this. And that's eventually why we won in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania. The districts with the highest combat casualties voted for Trump, Democratic districts, in kind of historic numbers. Working class Democrats came over and supported Donald Trump. Working class and middle class people saw in Trump a voice that will return America to her former glory. You got to remember, at 5 o'clock in the evening on Election Day, we get the exit polls. And I've been telling them every day, through Billy Bush, all the debates, stick to the message. We're going to win this. 100% metaphysical certitude. Exit polls come out. We're tied in Ohio and Iowa, which I had us up 5 points. We're losing everywhere else. It's a landslide, Clinton landslide. 400 electoral votes. That's why in the newsrooms they're all high-fiving. Megyn Kelly's putting on her makeup. They're laughing. They're joking. The New York Times. Trump is not only beaten, this is a humiliating defeat. (8:30, 9 o'clock). Detroit Free Press. been around for 150 years, never been wrong, declared Michigan for Hillary Clinton. I said, hang on for a second, hang on for a second, hang on for a second. And you started to see it turn in Florida, in North Carolina, in Ohio. And finally at midnight, Detroit Free Press came out and said, correction, correction, too close to call. That's when I told Donald Trump he's president of the United States. Because we're going to win Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. You know where the exit polls were wrong? The pollsters are pretty good. They were wrong for two reasons. Number one, there's a lot of people that will vote for Donald Trump that don't want to tell anybody about it, right? That's because of the cultural Marxist of what they're trying to do in demonizing working class and middle class people. The others, they had the algorithm wrong. They took what was coming from the cities and just extrapolated the historical algorithm and didn't understand that the small communities in the rural areas would come so overwhelmingly for Trump. That was the difference. Starting that night outside of Trump Tower, thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And they were not there for a victory celebration. Yes, President Trump, we had the people in the red hats. But it was basically the beginning of the nullification project, right? The resistance. They were not prepared to give President Trump a chance to bring the country together. Stephen Miller and I that night, President Trump's very superstitious. We didn't write a concession speech or a victory speech. Very superstitious. And I am too. I thought it was smart. So Miller and I are kind of doing our thing when we knew we'd won after midnight. Of course, AP didn't call it till 2:30 in the morning, right? Because the opposition party media didn't want Donald Trump on anywhere near time that people could see him. We knew Wisconsin were going to win and Michigan were going to win. Pennsylvania were going to win, but they held it all back. So we write a speech, and it's like a campaign speech. It said, hey, nobody thought we were going to win. This is the biggest upset in American political history. We're going to march to D.C., and we're going to take on the permanent political class. Pitchforks and torches, we're coming. That's not the speech he gave. You know why? President Trump or President-elect Trump came down there and said, hey, I think tonight we ought to try to bring the country together. It was President Trump from the very beginning that reached out to the opposition. If you think of those three things, immigration, manufacturing jobs, and the foreign wars, go back to the State of the Union. Besides all the happy talk and all this stuff, we're going to work together, we're going to be unified, the Democrats are going to work together, that's all nonsense. You've seen the last couple of days. You've seen what they're doing with these committees. We lost the House, they're going to weaponize all of it. The investigations, the Mueller report, and they're upfront about it. That's how they won. I'm a big boy, I get it. But State of the Union, three things. I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to demand structural changes from China in this trade deal. And we're going to get out of Syria and Afghanistan in some sort of organized fashion. The same three things from August to the time we won. The tripod. We get in office, and you know, it's pretty well documented. There were not a lot of people on the campaign that thought we were going to win. I think you've had the last two speakers the last couple of years, Chris Christie and Rudy. Rudy was really on the campaign. Chris Christie helped us in the debates. I think they both told you guys, you know, didn't expect to win. We didn't. But if you look at what the Trump agenda was and what he put in as the plan, it's pretty straightforward. Number one, American first national security, economic nationalism, and deconstruction of the administrative state. America first national security policy. And Donald Trump is an American hero for doing this. An American hero. And I say that as somebody that served in the South China Sea and served in the Persian Gulf and served in the North Arabian Sea on a destroyer in a battle group. I've got nephews, cousins, and a daughter that graduated from West Point and served in the 101st Airborne in Iraq. He's a hero. What did he do? He questioned the fundamentals of the system we have today. Remember this post-war international rules-based order from Europe, NATO, to the Persian Gulf, to the South China Sea, to the Northwest Pacific. It is a series of commercial relationships, capital markets, trade deals, and an American security guarantee. That's what it is. These, under all the geniuses on Morning Joe, and all the geniuses and all the think tanks, and all the geniuses in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, we had let this atrophy. They're not allies. They're protectorates. And what Donald Trump said, we have a $1 trillion defense bill. Don't believe the 780, the 716. You fully load it and look at all the different aspects of the rest of the government, the $4.3 trillion spending bill. $1 trillion is national security. $1 trillion. On a country that has $22 trillion in debt, $125 trillion of contingent obligations, and $1 trillion structural deficit that we have to have our enemies finance. And in having our enemies finance it, we pay for the entire military of China. Did Donald Trump cause that? Did Donald Trump cause North Korea or Venezuela or Afghanistan? Donald Trump walks in, he's got the Cuban Missile Crisis in North Korea, the Bay of Pigs in Venezuela, and Vietnam and Afghanistan, dumped on him by the geniuses, by the elites in this country, by the party at Davos. $7 trillion. Afghanistan's $2 trillion. $2 trillion. You have to embrace this. It's $2 trillion. I made it when I was national security. I said, I want to see the photos. This place got to be Shangri-La. I know the sources of proceeds. It's the U.S. taxpayer and the Treasury. I want to see the uses of proceeds. I want to see the schools for girls. I want to see the hospitals. I want to see the roads. We spent $2 trillion. I got to see it. It's not paradise. $2 trillion. What is it, 2,500 dead? Do you think the honored dead of 9/11 in Afghanistan, how proud of us do you think they are? On the negotiating committee for the Taliban in Doha today, there are four individuals that are at Gitmo. Don't know that fact, do you? Mainstream media kind of doesn't play that up, do they? Donald Trump walked into a debacle. He's the one that saved NATO. You know how he saved NATO? Secretary General told us they got to pay 2%. These countries have been getting a free ride off the United States forever. We want an alliance, not a protect. You got to pay 2%. Germany's the worst, 1.2%. That goes for global warming, healthcare. When you look at combat readiness, you look at equipment, operations, interoperability, maneuvers. England can put up 1 combat division, France 2 combat divisions, all the rest of NATO 1 combat division. It's an American security guarantee, like in the Persian Gulf, like in the South China Sea, like in the Northwest Pacific. And here's why the deplorables want a change. It's not bad enough. It's their money underwriting this. It's their kids that are there. Look who's on the 38th parallel. Look who's on the ships in the South China Sea. Look who's serving in Afghanistan and Iraq. Look at the average incomes of the dead and wounded. That's what Trump stepped into. That's why he went to Riyadh to say, there's got to be a change here. There are no more games. We're going to stop the financing of radical Islamic terrorism and its exportation. And we're going to be allies. We're going to stop this expeditionary force of Iran that's trying to take over the Middle East. In NATO, 2%. We're partners. The Secretary General said last week, $100 billion of increased spending since Donald Trump came in the NATO alliance for the militaries. $100 billion. That's Donald Trump. Don't see that it's not the front page of the New York Times, is it? Biggest thing, President Obama said, everybody said, Korea's the biggest issue, huge issue. We've been doing it for years, Korea, Korea, Korea. Donald Trump says something very different. I don't think so. It's China. We're at war with China. China's at economic war with us. It's been that way for 20, 25 years. All the geniuses, right? All the geniuses. As soon as China gets, into the World Trade Organization, as soon as they get most favored nation status in 99, 2000, they're going to become liberal, free market capitalists. Wrong. Great powers can't make these kind of mistakes. These are mistakes that get you out of the game. The compound annual growth rate of the American economy from 1946 to the day that China signed the World Trade Organization, I think in 99, 3.25%. Good times and bad times, average. From the time they signed it to the January 20th of 2017, 1.9%. Is that all because of China? No. But it's a large part because the investment. We de-industrialized the United States in about 25 years. And our elites, the hedge funds, and Wall Street, and the banks, with their partners in the permanent political class, allowed that to happen. If you go out to Ohio, if you go out to Michigan, you go to Wisconsin, you go to these rallies, I don't need to make some sophisticated argument about China. They get it. J.D. Vance, the guy that wrote Hillbilly Elegies, the best sociological study of the Trump movement. He's a guy, a Marine captain, went to Yale. He cites the studies from Harvard and MIT. There's a 100% correlation between the factories that left for China, the jobs that left with them, and the opioid addiction crisis. Tariffs are not about a tax. Trump's plan is to bring the supply chain back to the United States. Economic nationalism, the second leg of the stool, is a combination of energy dominance and high value-added manufacturing. The new NAFTA deal, the bilateral trade deals we're doing with Korea and Japan, the negotiations of the 25% tax and tariff you see in the EU, it's to unite the industrial democracies to bring the supply chain back to the West that the elites in cahoots with the Chinese Communist Party shipped to China. That's where the jobs went. This is like the movie The Untouchables. It's when they say, hey, Sean Connery tells Kevin Costner, everybody knows where the whiskey is. Is do you have the political will to take the axe and go beat down the door? Trump has got that will. Look what he's done. And he didn't want to hear energy independence, energy dominance. Not just to get us away from this geopolitical nightmare and to allow us to make decisions as free men and women, but as the undergirding of an American economic renaissance. They ridicule and mock Trump every day. Watch Morning Joe. They're in the New York Times. They're ridiculing him and mocking him. And you read the Atlantic magazine. You go to these seminars. He's a moron. He's an idiot. On national security, he looked at that rules-based order and said, hey, it's a combination. National security is a combination of economics and military. And we had gotten to this mode, it's just all military. That's why we have $1 trillion budget. It's not. Our national security is a combination of the economics and the military in combination. And that's why the economics, you cannot be a great power unless you're a great manufacturing power. There were some pretty smart folks that taught us that. And we're living off that capital today. Hamilton and Polk and Jackson and Lincoln. Remember, Lincoln's the biggest nationalist we've had. He's fighting the Civil War. I come from Richmond. I know how they fought. He's fighting the Civil War hard. Passes the Transcontinental Railroad Act, the Homestead Act, and the Land Grant University. They had an idea of what a continental power could do. and how critical from Hamilton to Lincoln to Roosevelt, how it had to be predicated upon manufacturing. If you think we can run an economy with these guys in Silicon Valley that got, do 2 algorithms and have a $10 billion company and 4 guys work there, that's not reality. It's helpful, right? We need that. That's not what a great power does. Energy dominance in every vertical. In advanced manufacturing. Chinese understand this. The Chinese been at this for 4,000 years. It's called Barbarian Management 101. They look at us as a tributary state. We are Jamestown to their Great Britain. We send them soybeans and wheat and pork and cattle and natural gas, hopefully a lot more in the future, liquefied natural gas, and Boeing jets and Apple products. Oh, excuse me, we don't do that. They make that over there. Through not intellectual property theft, that's industrial espionage, that's bad enough. Forced technology transfers where they're gutting our innovation. The one thing America does better than anybody else. The forced technology transfers at $3.5 trillion over the last 10 years. And the tech companies will all tell you the biggest thing. That's what Trump has fought with these 301s. And this trade war is more than just the trade at the top. That's important. It's the structural change. He says structural changes, we have to break the mercantilist system that they have. Remember, this is the greatest enemy we've ever had. Hitler and Tojo and Mussolini and the Soviets, they could never imagine the financial crisis we did to ourselves that they could never do. But the rise of China is an enemy, and it's an enemy. Not the Chinese people. This is not the Chinese people. This is the Chinese Communist Party and a radical even faction of that now is totally consolidated power. And they have an organized plan. One Belt, One Road is to connect all of Eurasia, Iran and Turkey, all the way into Europe, all throughout South Asia, into the sub-Saharan Africa, into Brazil. What do you think Venezuela's about? Venezuela's about China. China, their Lebensraum is Australia, Venezuela, and Brazil. What did Bolsonaro win on? One of his big campaign promises was China can buy into us, they can't buy us. Made in China 2025, the convergence of advanced chip design, artificial intelligence, robotics, is to leapfrog the West and take all advanced manufacturing. The rollout of 5G is the game, because 5G is the predicate for quantum computing. It's the next Internet of Things. It'll overwhelm the Internet. That's why Huawei is so important. Huawei's not a company. Huawei is a front for the People's Liberation Army. That's what the guy that's now pushing back, he's a legend in the PLA, the tech guy. Arresting the daughter, it'd be like arresting Bill Gates' oldest daughter if Bill Gates also owned the Pentagon. That's the engagement of Donald Trump with our elites when we got in there. Obama's pivot to Asia, remember this whole thing, he's going to pivot to Asia? It was one Marine brigade that went to, I think, Darwin, Australia. 100 years from now, this is all they're going to remember about us, the conflict with China. And we're going to win. We're going to win because Donald Trump changed the entire psyche of the American government to focus on what the real problem is, on what the real issue is. You know why Europe's got the migrant problem, the refugee problem? It's coming from sub-Saharan Africa. It's the Chinese. Know we got this problem in Venezuela? What they're trying to do in Brazil, the Caribbean? It's China. And they're playing hardball, and they're playing for keeps. So where do we stand on all this? You have to separate out the signal from the noise. There's a lot of noise. And our beloved president will throw a flashbang grenade every day to make it more noise, right? Let Trump be Trump. If he didn't have Twitter, he wouldn't be president of the United States. Remember, Twitter disintermediated, it's a Harvard Business School word, disintermediated the mainstream media. It allowed him to go over and talk directly to the people. And we have good days on Twitter, and we have days that are less good on Twitter. Modern politics is all about mobilization and turnout. 2010, the Tea Party. And by the way, 10-year anniversary yesterday, Rick Santelli's rant. 10 years. Followed from that meeting in the Oval Office. A couple of months later, it was Obama and Santelli yesterday, the rant that started the Tea Party. Remember, 2010, 62 seats. All these congressmen with no money. Right? People came in, Pompeo, Cruz, Mulvaney, Nikki Haley, governor of South Carolina, all the players today, all because of 2010 Tea Party. 2014, another big victory for the Republicans. 16, victory. 18, defeat. Why? The left, the progressive left, and the cultural Marxist left, the resistance and the Me Too movement, and the Time's Up movement, and Tom Steyer, they understand something the Republican establishment refuses to admit. Donald Trump is a transformative president and a historic figure. They understand that he's going to be in their lives 10, 20, 30 years from now. And it's not just because of the Supreme Court justices. It's other things he's doing on deconstructing the administrative state. Remember, why is deconstructing the administrative state so vitally important? The progressives understood 40 years ago, 30 years ago, you're going to win elections, you're going to lose elections. We got to get something that's election-proof. That's the administrative state. They've created this fourth massive branch of government that the founders had no earthly idea. It's got its own rulemaking, it creates its own laws, has its own courts, has its own executive ability, has its own enforcement. Look at the EPA, right? One example. Why are Gorsuch and Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court? People argue, is Kavanaugh even a social conservative? He back us on his courses, backing on gay marriage? Have no idea, but I tell you what, they believe in the Chevron case. They are the two leading intellectuals on deconstruction of the administrative state. That's the modern, and I'm not denigrating the social conservatives, but some of that's settled law. What's not settled law is taking this thing apart brick by brick. That's the difference. Modern politics today is about populism globally. That's why I spend so much time going around the world. And that's why I'm trying to continue to build this populist movement here that I've been working on for 10 years. That's the spectrum. I tell donors all the time, I said, you may hate my guts, a lot of you do, but it's not the populist nationalist versus Paul Ryan and the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation is fabulous people, don't get me wrong, and Paul Ryan's a good guy. But that's not the alternative. That cannot win national elections. How do I know that? Paul Ryan, what, they lose Wisconsin by 9 points when we ran with Romney? On the weekend beforehand, it's Paul Ryan that calls us up. We don't go to Wisconsin. On the last Sunday, we don't go. Why? They wave us off. They said, we're going to lose by 3 or 5 points. I said, we're right over the target. We're going to win. They won't hear it. We can't do it again. If we lose again, we're over. Trump, we don't go. Trump wins by what, 15, 20, 25,000 votes? The alternative is AOC. Last July, she was a bartender. Now she's one of the most powerful political figures in the world. That's just a fact. Remember, Bill Parcells had a great saying, you are what your record says you are. She won. She won by knocking on doors. Won a ton of votes, but she won the hard way. She's got grit, determination. Now, she doesn't know much, and what she knows is dead wrong. But they put out this the Green New Deal. If you have not read the fact sheet for the Green New Deal, not just do you have to read it, I need you to read it and I need you to think about it. That's not going to be implemented now. I mean, it's 22 trillion here, 10 trillion here, 5 trillion here. Look at the direction of it. I would argue that we have already lost the war for the culture because of the cultural Marxist, right? They lost in the economics, but they won on the ability, the long march through our institutions, to turn this into something that the founders never envisioned. And we're fighting a rear guard action, and you know that, in the schools, in the churches, in our other institutions, in the media, in the high arts, in the popular arts. That's a rear guard action. It's kind of gotten actually half-hearted now, I think. What AOC lines out is, that's Marxism. You got two choices in populism. You're either going to have total state intervention, or you're going to have right-wing populism, which is predicated upon deconstructing the administrative state. The thing that we have to get to is to make this more entrepreneurial. And the burden is going to kind of rest on your shoulders, I hate to tell you. First off, you do understand that you're exactly the folks that AOC and those guys are coming for, right? And here's how they're coming for it. It's not the marginal income tax rates. I'm the guy in the Oval who was arguing 44% over $5 million, right? To save the entrepreneurs. Because that would have gutted the Democratic Party if that had been the tax bill. It would have gutted. You wouldn't need a Howard Schultz to run as a moderate, or Bloomberg. It would have gutted it, at least for the moment. They're coming for your assets. I have said this for years now. Look in Europe, where you can't really make money. Pocahontas threw it out there. Her opening bid is what, 2% at 50 million? Another 1% on top of that at $1 billion? That's an opening bid. You wait till 5 presidential candidates signed up for AOC's Green New Deal. Read the madness in that. It is pure madness. 5. Remember, we drove the conversation. One of the things we did at Breitbart and these other things, we drove the conversation to the right on immigration and trade. When Sessions and I talked in 2013, we took trade from number 100. Nobody talked about trade. We took trade from 100 to number 2 and immigration from number 2 or 3 to number 1 because they're both the same sides, they're two sides of the same coin. Immigration is just unfair competition from unskilled labor to flood the zone. And the trade deals are just unfair competition by foreign labor to your workers. It's the same thing. That's how we were able to make it. That's how we drove the conversation. Christie and Rudy and these guys, remember, there were 16 people running against Trump. It took billions of dollars of the Kochs and Singers and Cato and AEI to groom that field. That was the best you had. Bush, Rubio, Cruz, Rand Paul, Chris Christie. You take a vertical, you had the number, you had best person there. Bang, 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 all represented. Donald Trump went through that like a sift through grass, right? You could have given him a standing 8 count at the beginning. Why? Donald Trump talked in a totally different vernacular. Trade and immigration, they didn't even know how to respond. Don't know how to respond today. The biggest people fight Trump all the time on trade is the Republican establishment with this radical idea, and it's a radical idea that's gutted this country, and that's free trade. Free trade against a mercantilist, totalitarian government like China? Do you understand what the non-trade barriers to get in there, what you have to give up to even get a tiny bit of market access? You can't free trade with that. It's insane. It's what helped deindustrialize this country. Brexit and 2016 are inextricably linked. People realize that it's why they're inextricably linked is the question. It's China. It's the exportation of deflation and its overcapacity that gutted industrial England. Remember, Brexit was passed because labor voters in those Midland districts voted for it, and they wouldn't tell pollsters. That's why they looked like they were 3 to 5 down, and they won by what, 3 points? That swing is because they didn't tell guys. So where are we now? We're not in great shape. The economy's booming. The deconstruction administrative state stays, and I asked today around the tables, hopefully it's not happy talk. You have serious people trying to push these things through. You've now got a court that I think understands this. It's going to be a multi-decade project because it took 40 or 50 years to get here, but you have to win elections. The nullification project started the first day. It was the opposition party media, which was the key, the weakened Democratic Party, right, and that kind of donor class. And here we are, we lost the House. The House was everything. We lost the House in 2018. And now President Trump, and I say this all the time, this year is going to be the most vitriolic year in American politics since before the Civil War, 1856. The next 3, 4, 5 months. Look what the House has done already. You see that beauty that Cummings dropped yesterday on the nuclear power program? Nobody saw that coming. They kind of did that in secret. You're going to get these every day. Oh, by the way, did the New York Times and the Washington Post have it before everybody else? So they could write hit pieces that would be leads in their stories and then be on MSNBC and CNN all day? Get ready for it because that's coming every day. Right? The Mueller report. I don't think the Mueller thing is it's going to be 700 pages of obstruction, 50 pages of, this nonsense collusion. But Rachel Maddow is going to get that. She's not going to take a bath for a week. She's going to be broadcasting 24/7, right? You know it's coming. They're going to connect dots and, do all this stuff. Look at what Trump's up against. The Committee to Save America, which Politico and Axios reported on in the summer of 2017, which were certain people around Trump that determined they knew better on America First national security and economic nationalism, and they were going to stop it. The anonymous op-ed, which are clearly people, they admit it, and the New York Times did the due diligence. They're people either on the cabinet or at cabinet rank or senior administrative officials say, we're going to stop you. And then look at McCabe. McCabe is the head of counterintelligence for the FBI. He sat with the Deputy Attorney General of the United States and talked about putting a wire on to go into the Oval Office, to have a coup. This only happened once before in American history. That's right before Antietam, the Union Army, McClellan and these guys thought Lincoln didn't know how to fight it. They want to have a negotiated settlement with the South. Right? We almost had a coup in 1863, I think it was. 1862 in the fall. You got a silent coup going on. I'm not a wingnut. I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. I never say deep state. It's up in your face. That's the nullification project. And now they're going to make Trump run the gauntlet. At the exact same time, we got to be building for 2020. It's all about winning elections. You have to win elections. Look, we're in a great geopolitical struggle that's greater than the Cold War with China. China, Iran, and Turkey are working as an organized, quasi-organized unit to control the Eurasian landmass. And that's basically been America's foreign policy for 125 years. In World War I, in World War II, in the Cold War, whether it's in Vietnam or other places. We will never allow a power to control the Eurasian landmass. Well, China is far down the road of trying to do it, and Donald Trump is the individual stood in the breach and said, this is not going to happen. You're seeing the beginnings of this narrative about socialism. He ended his fantastic State of the Union speech with it. He did it the other day in Miami about Venezuela. When you look at China and Persia and Turkey and Venezuela and Cuba, maybe Russia, others, the free world versus that. It's going to be very, very tough. We're building to another financial crisis, I think. We haven't solved the one for 2008. We just kicked the can down the road. You see out there all the time, we're over-leveraged. China's whole economy is kind of a con. We have no idea when that could collapse. And we're going to kind of have to thread that needle. Remember, this is what I really admire about Donald Trump. Not only did he deliver over 3% economic growth, we took $400 billion of liquidity out in quantitative tightening. And we just stopped that. Not just the interest rates. We took liquidity out of the market. He got that growth without flooding the zone. Understanding you've got to let that asset bubble down slowly. Look, I'd like to have a cheerier message, but I pride myself in being able to see reality clearly. And here's clearly. It's going to rest on your shoulders. Your shoulders and the deplorables are what's going to get us through here. We're in the great fourth turning of American history. The Revolution, the Civil War, the Great Depression of World War II. That every 80 to 100 years happens. We're 3 for 3. And history is going to judge us. History is going to judge not the millennials, they're going to judge this generation. We got 10, 15, 20 years, 25 years to get through this. It's going to be tough. How tough is it going to be? What happened on the day Kavanaugh was voted? Did you see the gallery of the Senate? Did you see the plaza around the Supreme Court? I have a house right on the other side of the Supreme Court. That was a mob. There's no difference in that mob than what was in France in 1792. There's no difference, no difference. They were banging on the Supreme Court doors. They have security coming. They would have banged the doors in the Supreme Court. Who knows what they would have done? That's your future. And this isn't a time we got 3.5% growth and all-time low unemployment. You wait till the worm turns. It's going to be on your shoulder, not just for Trump, but for what comes after Trump. And it's not going to be easy, and you're going to be demonized, okay? Remember, and I saw it firsthand, every second, it was divine providence that brought Trump in and won. We were a ragtag island of lost toys, right? It was Trump. And he didn't have to do it. He's a billionaire. He's a patriot. That's why he did it. And they've tried to destroy him. And in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, they're going to try to destroy him. They're going to try to destroy him personally and his business. Watch Moeller, but look at that Southern District in New York. Look what's coming. Look what's going to come. And that's just not about Trump. They're trying to send a message. If you stand up for the deplorables, that's what you're going to get. They have to destroy Trump. And that's what we have to defend him. Next time you're talking to your congressman, next time you're talking to the senator, they're coming in begging you for money, because they're all going to come and beg you for money. You ask them one question. When's the last time you've been in front of a microphone defending Donald Trump? A microphone. Just ask him that. Let me give you the good news. There is good news. If I had to pick what side of the football to be on and what team, I'd pick you and the deplorables. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We'll now get to the fun part.
I thought you were going to sing. We have time for just a couple of questions. We've got mics on the side. If you've got one, let's get right to them. And let's start with you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mr. Bannon, you mentioned Donald Trump multiple times, and you kind of got towards this in the end, but still want to ask it. If Donald Trump were reelected, there would still be a void post-second term. Is there another vessel to lead the cultural populism or govern cultural populism? And on top of that, what are the top risks of deconstruction of the administrative state? What's that going to look like? And how has the current administration began that process? And how is it affecting the American class, from billionaires to the individuals that don't have $400 to buy a generator and most likely might be on welfare?
Awesome. Great questions. Look, we're going to have to grow the politicians and have to get better at being able to articulate populist. You know, one of the reasons I won more than I lost in the Oval Office, in the West Wing, TPP, Paris, right? But I lost a bunch too. Lost on the tax bill, lost on other things. One of the reasons is that the populist movement, the economic national movement, we don't have a think tank. We're just getting these ideas. It's a little bit unformed. And Trump's great because Trump's game day player. He'll call audible in a second. I'm not saying this is being made up as we go along, but some of it is a little bit jury rigged, right? We got to get better. We got to get better policy. We have to, just like AOC's thing's a little unformed. They're unformed on the left. They just keep saying, hey, it's going to be 22 trillion here, 10 trillion here, right? And the media kind of claps for them. They're not going to do that here. We got to get better. But we have to think these problems. If the American working man doesn't get ownership in this system, it's going to be over. Remember, millennials right now are nothing but 19th century Russian serfs. They're better fed, they're in better shape, they have more information, they don't own anything because of the asset inflation, and no interest on their savings account. And they're not going to own anything. Right now, a millennial is 20% behind where his parents were at the same point in life. And it doesn't get better. There's not going to be any pension plans. It's all a gig economy. They understand this. That's one of the reasons they're saying, hey, I looked at capitalism. I looked at this kind of neo-feudalism. Let me try some socialism. We got to change that. We have to change it. If we don't make this an ownership society and not just give happy talk about privatizing Social Security, if we don't get wages up, if we don't bring this is the thing with China, if we don't bring high value added manufacturing jobs back to this country, that people can build a family around one earner, because family formation is killing us. Why is the birth rate down? Why is family formation take so long? Why is it so late in life? Because millennials are rational. They're saying it's economic angst. I don't know if I have an economic future. I don't know if I can afford to have a bigger family, right? If we don't, that's the beating heart of the problem. That's why this trade deal's emblematic. Like I said, it's not tariffs. It's about human dignity and self-worth. You take manufacturing jobs away from the heartland of our country, and what you're going to have is the opioid crisis. On the deconstruction, by the way, you've got some very sophisticated people. I happen to think you're going to have regulation. I'm not an anarchist. I'm not a libertarian. I believe in regulation, but we got over-regulated. This administrative state was in every aspect of business. I don't need to tell you. You guys were the worst. You've had the worst of it, right? It's just logical of taking this back. You guys don't claim we don't have any regulations. You're not anarchists. You know this got to be regulated. It got too much. The nanny state in every aspect of your business. That's got to get. Right-wing populism is predicated on the entrepreneurial spirit in animal energies and vitality, right? That's what's opposite of Bernie Sanders and AOC, which is more state intervention. And if you read, not what I'm saying, read their documents. The Green New Day could have been put out by Lenin. They talk about a select committee is going to make everything. That's the old Soviets. Soviets were just the committees. Thank you.
All right, let's get one more.
Mr. Bannon, you portrayed President Trump as a populist, as a president for the working class. How do you explain that the Tax Reform and Jobs Act primarily benefits corporations by reducing the corporate tax to 21%? How do you explain the fact that millions of Americans still don't have health care? How do you explain the fact that there's been heavy deregulation in the banking industry? Or the fact that trillions of dollars or billions of dollars are going to be directed for erecting a border wall that is seen as antiquated and archaic? If you can,
I want to thank Hillary Clinton's campaign manager for showing up. Thanks, brother. I love it. No.
It's a very big tent.
I love it. Talking points from Rachel Maddow. No. Look, these are, okay. First off, the primary part of the tax cut, I'm not totally in love with the tax cut. Remember, I'm the guy in the Oval Office fighting for something different. But I understand the logic on the corporate side, which was key. You had to make us competitive with Germany and China. It's about bringing manufacturing jobs back. Is it perfect? It's not perfect, okay? We have to work and make it better. It's certainly better than the alternative we got on the left right now. Let's talk about the wall. The key, why do we have the lowest black unemployment in history? Why do we have the lowest Hispanic unemployment in, 40 years? Why are wages starting to rise in oil field services and in construction and agriculture? Why are wages rising in other places? We're starting to limit mass illegal immigration, right? Remember, mass illegal immigration destroys the black and Hispanic working class because it just floods the zone with more labor. And then it puts such a burden on the healthcare and the education system. That's why the Chamber of Commerce and the Republican establishment's for it. Remember, we got the Democrats who want the votes, and the Republican establishment likes the higher margins. I'm saying we're more than an economy, we're a civic society. And if we don't start to get back to, we have to build that civic society, and the one way we have to do it is to put American citizens first. Economic nationalism is what binds us together. Economic nationalism doesn't care about your race, your gender, your religion, your sexual preference. It doesn't care about any of that. Your color. It cares about just one thing, that you're a citizen of the United States of America. And if you're a citizen, the burden's not going to be on your shoulder to pay these taxes to keep the world free and have your kids go over there to keep it free, while they're literally destroying your way of life here and you've got to compete against the whole world unfairly. You know why the deplorables are mad? Because they're rational. They know exactly what's going on. And that's why the Paul Ryan heritage thing, God bless them, it ain't going to work. We got to address, I realize you came at it with an angle of attack and an attitude. That's fine. I appreciate that. We got to answer that question. We got to answer it our way. And if we don't answer it, we're going to lose 20 and 22 and 24. And then you're going to have AOC as Secretary of the Treasury, right? Do not dismiss her. Do not dismiss her. She embodies something that we should admire, which is grit and determination, right? Totally wrong on everything else. What we need in the Republican Party is more bartenders, right? More bartenders to win. More folks like you, more deplorables. That's how we're going to build this. That's how we're going to build this bench. Thank you very much.
Do you think there was a... Do you think there was ever a time that your parents dreamed that someday you'd be portrayed as the Grim Reaper on Saturday Night Live?
I don't think they thought I was kind of a Grim Reaper at home, so they were glad I left to go in the Navy.
Steve Bannon.
Thanks, guys.